We're back. We're live with another dope episode for y'all. This is an early episode. I usually don't get up early. It's about like 10 o'clock right now, and it's an important episode. Now this is really starting to feel like a job. I can't remember the last time I was, up this early. I'm an entrepreneur and stuff like that. So, and I'm into the nightlife, so things start a little bit later for me. But, I was excited to get up this morning to have a great conversation about mental health. So this is definitely a mental health issue. There's a lot of mental health issues going on, and there's going to be a lot of conversation on mental health today. But before we get into all that and I introduce our special guest, I'd like to give a special shout out to our number one sponsor, Quench Juice Cafe. Shout out to Quench Juice Cafe in Brockton, 194 Oak Street. Make sure you go get your smoothie. There's a BNF smoothie coming soon. It should already be out. Make sure y'all support. Get that BNF smoothie. Stay healthy. A lot of women are in the gym. They're getting ready for the summer. The pandemic, I believe it's over now. Everybody's outside, and a lot of women are getting into shape. This is going to be a cold summer, fellas. So make sure you get right. Get into the gym. Get your abs right, especially, a lot of people, money ain't the same, so you at least got to look good. So get that BNF smoothie. There's a lot of good ingredients in there for men, for your stamina, give you an extra 1 or 2 pumps in the bed. So, trust me, it'll make a difference. It'll save a marriage, and it'll do a lot for you in your life. So we got a special guest with us today. Her name is Kelly. I got it right off here. I did get it wrong, but her name is Kelly. She's gonna tell us about herself and her story and what made her start working in the social work field, and she's also a therapist. And let's give a hand clap, even though there's not a lot of people here. We got Noble with us for Kelly. It's an early start. We usually have people.
Good for 10 a.m.
we usually have people here. We usually have liquor, but it's too early for all that.
No, I appreciate you waking up this early, Daniel.
So
yeah.
So tell us, what's your profession and what you do?
Yeah. So there's a couple things I do. I teach. So I teach in a grad school program. My training for years. So I've been a therapist for about 20 years or so. And what I primarily do, or like my specific area, is traumatic stress. So it's like trauma, right? So what I've done all of my training in and all my clinical work and all of my postgraduate work was around traumatic stress. But like, if we want to get into the nitty gritty, it's really it's in what we would call it in research is like the neurobiological impact of trauma. It's the way that hardship and really difficult things change like the structure of our brains and change the way that our body reacts to things and the long lasting consequences. And then after sort of understanding the impact of all that, it's like, how do you build a life back after really hard things have happened? And how do you build a life that's worth living after really hard things have happened? Or after your entire childhood was really hard, right? Mm-hmm. And then you hit adulthood and are kind of hitting the skids a bit and trying to figure out what to do.
What made you enter that field?
Oh, right. I know. So that's
Did you go through any
question,
trauma? Did you
right?
go through any trauma as a child?
I grew up a little wild. Mm-hmm. I think the bigger issue, I went to college and I was actually going to be a doctor.
Okay.
Like every other asshole who goes to college and thinks they're super smart. But I went to I went to college on scholarship. That's how I got out of. I grew up in Albany, New York, and the way I got out of my city and kind of could afford to go to college is by getting a scholarship.
Sports?
So yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
what sport did you play?
So I played soccer forever, but I did crew, and I got more money for crew, which is like rowing, which is kind of a weird sport, but. Title IX. Shout out to Title IX, giving women's sports all the money and taking it from basketball. That's the way it works. Yeah, you're welcome.
You guys deserve it.
Yeah, right. So I went and I was at a D1 school, which was crazy and intense. And then I did sports for years there. And then I graduated. And I was in this small town in upstate New York called Ithaca. Mm-hmm. And my first job out of Ithaca was at a place called the Child Sexual Abuse Project. Mm-hmm. And so what they do is they take like totally untrained 21-year-olds and give them like a pager. And then this is a huge county. Have you ever lived in like a rural area? Or have you been in like a city?
I have before, and when I lived in California.
Oh, okay. Where in California?
It was more up north California.
Yeah, right. So so it's like you just drive forever.
Yeah,
And
drive
it's
forever.
just-
There's
it's
like
crazy.
one bar. There's
Right,
like,
totally.
you know,
Where like everyone knows
Yeah,
everyone.
everybody knows
I go to
each other.
freaking Wegmans and it'd be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I saw you in court last week. How's it going, man?
I seen a few Confederate flags and stuff like that.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And rural poverty is so different than urban poverty because I mean, there were families that so I was working at so what happened within that job is that whenever there was a case where kids had disclosed either sexual abuse or they had gone to a doctor and they found like, concerns, or kids were at the DA's office for charges, they would page us and we would go out and sit with kids through both the police interview process and grand jury and all their interviews. And so I was like 18 going out, like boom, 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 boom on all these country roads with police cruisers. Like it would be like tent city, you know what I mean? Like there's to be families who've been like lived on these isolated roads for generations. Like the incest was crazy. And it was so I finished college and then I took a couple of years off and was like, I'll just work and live before I go back to grad school. And after doing that job for a while and after working in schools and working with kids and working so closely with the like criminal justice system, I was like, I decided mental health was more what I wanted.
Yeah.
And it was I remember actually, I was going to medical school. I got in, I remember sitting down one day and like doing the math on all the debt I would owe when I graduated. And I would have been like $250,000 in debt by the time I graduated. And I was like, nah. So I pivoted and I applied to schools in Boston. And I came here for school. And then I worked in just 1,000 different places since I graduated. Worked in emergency rooms, doing child protection. I've worked in like residentials or inpatient psych stuff for kids and teens, and the undercurrent to all of it was working with people who had overwhelming, I mean, we call it trauma, right? But that's like a whole, like, what is trauma? Who counts it as trauma? So, but most of what I began working with initially was kids who were child welfare involved or kids who just had really bad, terrible shit happen and needed support and had no family and had nobody else. So, baby happened.
Do you think Will Smith went through any trauma? After that smack?
I think that being a celebrity, I think being a black celebrity, I think being a black man celebrity during the time he went up in Hollywood is profoundly traumatic.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah, that's true. That's very true. Especially a child fame celebrity.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think
he's been in Hollywood for a long time.
Totally. And he's produced and he's been in a long-term marriage.
Yeah.
Like whatever people think about their marriage, I think when you think of, like, especially when I look at what happened at with like this slap, this huge controversy that happened around the slap, right?
Yeah, I was watching the news yesterday, and Chris Rock is in town. He's in Boston.
Oh, no way.
And he's here for like a few days, and he's doing his stand-up comedy. And then the opening, well, it's sold out. So we live in a crazy time now. Pipe. This is good publicity for him. People actually feel bad for him, and people want to hear if he's going to talk about it or not. So you know how we are as a society today. We love drama.
It's like clickbait.
Yeah, clickbait. Yes, let's go see Chris Rock. Yep. And the newscaster, his opening, statement was, the slap that was heard across the world, it was like, damn. Yeah. So I feel like he's always going to be remembered for this.
For sure.
But
well, I was actually reading something and it was reminding me, you might be too young. How old are you?
I'm 33.
Oh,
Not lying, I'm 34. I forget. And that's how you know you're getting old. Right. You forget.
Like, carry the two. That's 37.
That's how you know you're getting old. I forgot. Just turned 34.
Do you remember when Tommy Lee slapped Chris Rock for making fun of Pam Anderson, like back in the day?
No, I don't.
So there was like this whole thing where Kid Rock made fun of Pam Anderson, and then Tommy went up and slapped, and they both got arrested.
This is the second time he got smacked, huh?
No. Kid Rock. I know you're so young.
Oh.
Kid Rock's that scraggly white guy. He now is like all about
Kid
Trump.
Rock got smacked. I thought you said Chris Rock. Okay. I'm like, damn, they're just abusing Chris Rock.
Like, that hasn't been reported enough. Tommy Lee Jones slapped him. No, you've been too young. No, I think it comes down to like attachment, right? I don't think it's trauma. I mean, I'm sure.
Well, he's been dealing with some trauma, entanglements.
Sure. I know.
Red table talk. And one thing I like to talk about with Will Smith, I definitely think he overreacted as a professional.
Yeah.
A brother in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You would think there's some camaraderie there with individuals, and even though he's a comedian, but they're both in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I would think that they're friends to a certain degree.
Yep.
But he overreacted because I felt like you should have high tolerance if you're in Hollywood.
And I would imagine he does, right? So I think that it's sort of like everybody has a point at which they just can't tolerate it anymore. And I think whether Chris knew or didn't know about the alopecia, and whether Chris was taking a cheap shot or not taking a cheap shot, I would imagine that there's like 9 other things that were setting him off, and that this was just the 10th, as opposed to this one joke was the thing that lit him up and made him go upstage.
But I feel like we should know the time and the place that we're in.
So there's the additional pressure
that
comes, right?
So I feel like it's hard to control your emotions.
Yeah.
Definitely when things are happening in real time. But I feel like when Will Smith looked at his wife and seeing her reaction to the joke, because at first Will Smith was just laughing and he didn't think there was an issue with it. Yeah. And then he looked over at his wife and she was serious. Obviously, she was offended by it, which led Will Smith to react the way he reacted, overly react. And there's this big thing now where married women, are not celebrating, but acknowledging the fact that they understand what Will Smith did because he's defending his lady, he's defending his wife.
Yep.
But then again, we have to also defend our husbands too, right? To a certain degree, where I felt like Jada could have told him, "You need to sit your ass down. Right. You're gonna embarrass yourself. You're gonna embarrass me." But I don't know. I feel like there's so many angles you can take from this short. The short display of anger, you know?
I think so. I think, right, like if I'm going to make it really boring and talk about how we would think about this in literature research, it's called toxic masculinity.
Yeah,
right? And so
definitely toxic.
Right.
Yeah.
And so toxic masculinity is this idea that if he doesn't defend her and if he doesn't do anything, he's less of a man or not as much of a man. And so then I think about like, okay, so he's in this situation and he's on stage and he's nominated and he's had like a lot of great press for the movie that's coming out, and then he gets this joke and it's wild at his wife, and there's like he's already been sort of, whether humiliated is the right word or not, about the entanglements.
Absolutely he was. I damn near seen tears coming out his eye on the red table.
The interviews.
Yeah.
And it's like, how could you do this to me? Like, you set up this podcast and look what you and Grammy have done.
Exactly.
Right. And so his life has been put out there. And so his masculinity is already in question, that he's got this wife he can't be in charge of and can't handle. And then a joke's made about her. And I feel like it's one of those situations where, and I appreciate and totally respect the conversation about needing to control his feelings. But if you look at the like crucible, like the pressure that he's put under in a position after having to have his masculinity questioned, after being a black man in Hollywood, after being nominated, he's at the tail end of his career, right? He's been doing this for like 40 years, and now he finally is nominated for an Oscar, and then this happens. It's like, what is the expectation? Like, how much can a person tolerate before they're having moments that they can't manage, which in no way justifies being physical or being aggressive, because I think he's going to have more fallout from that than anybody else will, because he's just going to look like another angry person who can't control himself.
And not only another angry person, another black angry person, man. Which and heightens the stereotype of black men who can't control their anger, black men who communicate with violence, women. You know. But I do feel like Will Smith is just not a regular person. He's a professional. And to be an alpha male, you know, that's a word that's popular these days. We're talking about alpha male and being super masculine. You have to control your emotions. There's a time and a place for everything. You could have smacked Chris Rock after he got off stage, after the show or in the break room, wherever. But you chose that time where you let your emotions get the best of you. Matter of fact, you let your wife control your emotions, because you could have stayed in pocket and you could have dealt with it after. And I feel like with black men, we have a lot of pressure on us to defend our women, to defend our wives, because black women in America are undervalued, do get mistreated, get disrespected by men, period. It's even black men. So I understand the pressure of protecting them, but sometimes I feel like women should also acknowledge the fact that black men do have it hard, and sometimes we have to protect them from themselves. And I felt like Jada, I don't know what type of pussy she has. Right. Obviously, I call it Satan juice.
You're like, I did watch the red table.
Because she makes guys do crazy things after embarrassing them. Well, Jada could have control that situation and be like, Will, sit your ass down, not now, smack this motherfucker after. Right. But it's like, she allowed it to happen. She wanted it to happen.
Shared responsibility.
So who's protecting Will Smith now? There's nobody to protect Will Smith. Now he has to take the embarrassment. He might get suspended. They're trying to take his awards away.
Yep, they're trying to take
He's
him
facing
from the
all this
committee.
backlash, and now he has to apologize, and he looks like the angry black man.
Right.
And all he was trying to do was protect his wife.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple. I think he was trying to protect his wife. I think he was
Love
also,
yourself, Kings.
That's right.
Love yourself.
That's right, Danny. That's the whole point of today.
Protect yourself.
That's right. Protect yourself because the consequences are not fucking worth it.
There's consequences, man.
I know.
You know.
Well, and I think that there was this. It was this longitudinal study that was done. It was out of University of Texas, right? And what they were looking at is based in relationship, and they were looking at splits based on like age and racial demographic and all kinds of stuff. And they were asking people in long-term relationships, like how much permission, so in heterosexual couples, they were asking the wives, how much permission do you give your husbands to be vulnerable and like talk about how they're feeling? Or how much do you actually take what they're feeling and needing into consideration and put that above what you want or you need, right? And everyone in theory said all the time, everyone, white people, BIPOC community, like everyone was like, oh, I totally put my husband's needs above mine. Mm-hmm. So then they went
lies,
right? And that's so it's $50,000 in research, Daniel. That's it. And then they went back and broke down conversations where they actually would record people talking, and they would give the husband prompts to talk about like things that were really hard at work or things that they were remembering from their childhood they really struggled with, or times where they just felt humiliated in the workplace and didn't know what to do. And what they found through watching these conversations is that the wives were so uncomfortable when their husbands started showing vulnerability as opposed to this like protective masculinity. What they wanted to hear was like, I got it, don't worry about it, I'm taking care of it. Mm-hmm. But when people started to show like fragility or being like overwhelmed or getting tearful, their wives were like, yuck, and backed up.
Yeah.
And it started,
fucking bitch, my husband's a bitch.
Right, that's exactly, and it was all these people like, no, I totally welcome it, I'm a feminist, I support but all these subtle signs that happened in communication, or all these subtle things that happened. So it's like, which is fair, I think, and accurate to say like, why wasn't she asking him to sit down? I think that there's this passive communication that happens all the time in relationships. They're like, no, be polite, be gentle at home and private behind closed doors, maybe sometimes, but definitely not where people are going to see. Make it look better when we're in public, do something different. And it's subtle, and people who say they don't do it were even coded as noticing and doing it in private too. So I think men, and I think black men in particular, are in this real impossible bind sometimes of really struggling with knowing how to both do the things that you're expected to do societally, how to do the things that are going to keep you safe and are not going to sort of code you as being a threat or being dangerous or overly consequenced. And then also be in a relationship where you can be both like tender and vulnerable and also
a protector.
Right. It's exhausting.
Me as a man who's been in relationships, who's been vulnerable before, and I understand, being a black man, how hard it is to share your vulnerabilities to, people in general, not just your partners. But now I'm in a different stage in my life and protecting my vulnerability because I know how your vulnerability could be used against you.
Right.
Sometimes you can open up, you can share all these informations and you're in a long-term relationship and this person starts to see deficiencies with you, and all these other things, and your vulnerabilities that a lot of people don't get to see because, you just don't wear them, you don't allow people to see them. So, I feel like when you get into these relationships sometimes with certain women who want to dig deep inside you and tell me everything, like I'm going to protect you.
Who want to get to know you.
They want to get to know, not only females want to get to know you, they want to get to know you to a different degree, a higher degree than your old partner. So women always want you to be the most vulnerable with them. Like you told her.
Well, it's wanting to feel important.
You told her this already. What didn't you tell her? Tell me something else that these other women don't know about you. The mother bitches don't know. These other women don't know about you. So I feel like as men, sometimes that's worked, that's used against us. Now I'm at a stage in my life, I protect my vulnerability.
What does that mean to you? What does protecting your vulnerability look like?
I give what I want to give.
And how do you decide? How do you decide what's the right amount to give and what's not?
Depending on her sexual activity.
There it is.
Depending on how you make me feel, baby.
I'm gonna give you a list of what I want. I'll give you a list of what I'll share.
I feel like it depends on the person. You know, how comfortable that person makes me feel. Where I see me and this person going. Do I feel like it's a short-term thing? Do I feel like it's a long-term thing?
So if it's a longer-term thing and you're starting to talk, how do you know what tells you, like, this is a story we can do and this is not one I'm giving you? Is it like a feeling once you start talking about it that happens? Is it their response as you're talking?
The responses. I don't like people nagging me to give up my vulnerability.
What a shock.
You know, there's always poking you like, come on, talk more. Tell me this.
What happens when they do that?
Because I feel like.
Does it make you angry?
Depends on how they handle the information that I give them.
But when they're like, what do you mean? Like, say more about that.
Yeah.
Like, tell me more about that. Does it make you feel like you're just being like suffocated a little bit?
Yeah,
like,
suffocated.
Get the fuck off me. Like,
yeah,
this is too
yeah.
much.
This is too much.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know how people use the information. You know, you tell them, and sometimes in relationships, people will use your vulnerability against you. You get into arguments, heated arguments with your partner.
I was waiting. I was like, here it comes. Yeah.
You know, you're this,
like,
you're
it was
that.
all fine telling you we were laying in bed together, but now all of a sudden.
Remember when you got smacked? Like, come on.
You're like,
I want to defend you. I want to defend you.
Right.
Like, so those are the things that I'm aware of. And those are the things that I feel like I have to protect. Maybe, it does hurt me in relationships, but.
I think, there's this theory of, everyone has an attachment style, right? It's like the way that they connect to the world, the way they connect to other people. And like some people have this secure, which means like early on, they had parents who like met their needs most of the time and not a lot of scary things happened and they just like lucked out and had a good enough, safe enough. And so in relationships, it's easy for them to like draw boundaries and they have a really easy time leaving relationships that are unhealthy or they don't feel good in. They know exactly what they want. It doesn't feel overwhelming to share because they feel pretty solid sharing or not sharing, right? Like that's lucky people who grew up. And then there's this category of insecure attachment. And so there's like avoidant, ambivalent, anxious, and dismissive. And so avoidant attachment is it's the way you relate to, so your attachment style is like how you relate to friends, how you relate to partners, how you relate to people you sleep with one time. Like it's just the way you relate to the world. And
I try not to get too attached.
That's my avoidant. That's where we're going.
I try not to get too attached.
But it's not, but what's so complicated, right, is that avoidant attachment tends to come, there's like a specific profile of things that happen to get you there, right? But like avoidant attachment, what's so complicated is that we are all wired for connection. Like we want to be in connection with other people, which is why you keep trying to date or like hang out with people or go home with people because it's better than being alone. That's like antisocial. That's like a whole different thing, right? But like once they get close,
just because I'm alone doesn't mean I'm lonely.
Write that shit down. Put that in the comments, right? We're gonna put that in a t-shirt. Just because I'm alone. Exactly. And so avoidant attachment is like, I will never let you see what's really deeply underneath because it just feels too threatening. It makes me anxious. It makes me uncomfortable. And when I feel anxious and uncomfortable, I get irritable. It's like people who are in a longer term relationship. I'm sure you would know people in your life who are in like a relationship but do a lot of hitting on the side when they can, as they can, and like won't leave the relationship but like won't stop what they're doing. And
you can say my name.
I wasn't even talking about you.
It's okay.
No, just kidding.
I'm
for
sure you know people.
Listening.
Motherfucker, it's you.
No. But like, and so then from the outside lens, you'd be like, yeah, you never. Yeah. But what's so hard is from the outside, you'd be like, well, why don't you just leave the relationship then? They'd be like, well, I don't want to because it's like good enough and it's kind of comfort. And it's like, well, then why don't you stop like hitting on the side? Like, why don't you stop with all the side people?
Absolutely.
And they're like, well, because I get something out of that. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, insecure, when people would get all that from one person, they'd get the attraction, the desire, the feeling wanted, like all the stuff you get from people on the side, you get that from the person that you love. But what happens for people with this avoidance style is they're like, that intimacy like freaks me the fuck out. Like it's too much for me and it makes me feel irritable when they get too close, and I like them and I'm into it, but I don't want that to be my whole life. And so it looks like people don't care, and it looks like when you're in a relationship with someone, you can't get close enough to them. And so then people start harassing and pushing and wanting to know more, and then start throwing things in your face because the person you're with is trying to get in and get their hands around it, but always feeling like they're on like the door. There's a door between you.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And so, but then the complication is that people with that attachment style also attract people in relationships that have more of an anxious style, who are like clinging, like baby koala bears to the mother, like holding on and never letting go. So when you have really different styles of connection, if you were with somebody, not you, if somebody was with somebody who had this really dismissive style of like, I'm just not going to be totally into it, I'm going to do what I do, and also I'll lie to your face and I will feel kind of weird about it, but I'm not bad enough to change my behavior, and I'll kind of deny things that are happening and keep you kind of guessing.
Every time you say not you, it sounds like you're talking about me. It
sounds like I'm saying you. We're talking, but this is so many people, right? This is probably like 20% of the population, and I think it gets labeled as like a tradition, like a typically male behavior, or something we really socialize men to do. But what's so hard is I think people get criticized for being like unfaithful in relationships or not sharing enough, but it's based on fear and discomfort, as opposed to being based on like being just a total fucker, or like being unempathic or cold or
Do you think that men and women can have the same sexual response?
Say more. What do you mean?
Like, do you know, because we live in a society where there's a double standard, where men can have single men, and I'm talking about single women, shouldn't have the same sexual responses. You know, where men are more like animal-like. We here, we're there. Women are supposed to be more reserved, more protective, more secure of their body and what they have. Do you feel I feel like society now has changed. Well, women now are starting to change that narrative that they're equal to men, even sexually. That, you know, they can have the same sexual response as single men.
Yeah, I think they always have. I think that the difference has been whether people are transparent or talk about it. This is what's always so interesting to me, right? We say that and we're like, men are out running the streets. Who do you think they're sleeping with? One woman who just decided to go crazy in town, and like everyone's kids. I think it's always been a relatively equal. I think that there has been a social narrative that has been that women really want to catch and capture and be in an intimate relationship, but like from what I know of the people in my life and the friends I've had, like they have higher body counts than most of the dudes
they're fucking.
I know. Right.
Women are out here fucking.
Right? It's just always so funny because it's like people think men are out running the streets. It's like, well, they're not, unless we're talking about like, same-sex couples, or like, there's people they're sleeping with. I think that birth control was a real limitation. I think once birth control happened, that was like the sexual revolution. And now I think what's happened is that people with the social media, online dating, it's just easier and anonymous.
Now. People are more accessible.
Totally. And so I think it's like, oh, there's been this real societal change. It's like, nah, it's always been.
So the reason why I say that, because when people get into relationships, start practicing intimacy. And,
that was classy, Daniel. That was classy.
I try to switch it up a little bit during I might drop a...
People out here fucking. When they begin practicing intimacy together.
So when people start practicing intimacy and, trust and all that, and, partnership, then we're supposed to leave this single sexual response behind us. But do you believe that when men cheat, it's more of a physical thing versus when women cheat is more of an emotional thing? Or do you feel like it's all the same shit?
I feel like when men cheat, it's not really about physical. I feel like it's about feeling wanted and feeling attracted and feeling valued. But I think that the way that men have been taught to feel valued...
I thought it would have been the other way around. I thought women...
I know you do.
You came here to fuck me up?
Bring your girls in. We'll do a couple therapy sessions next time. We got some things to talk about. I think that the way that men have been socialized to feel valuable is to feel sexually attractive, right? And so the way that you feel good about, the way that most men feel good about themselves is being told that they're available, that they can hit, they can pull, they can like get people in bed with them, and that's what makes them feel kind of good, right? But it's all about, I think, the way in which you feel valued. I think that if we lived in a society that socialized men to feel valued by being vulnerable, by being emotionally in touch, by being accessible, and by having a sense of their emotions and having safe places to talk about it, it would be totally different. I think that girls I think that women, or like female identified folks, I think the way that they find value is being attracted. Like having people be attracted to them makes them feel valuable.
Attention seeking.
Attention, right? Totally. And I think in particular, I think it's actually really much what studies will say is that really attractive young girls start getting male attention so early that it becomes formative to their personality structure, right? And so like really cute or really attractive young women start getting older male attention starting at like 12, right? Creeps. And then as they grow up, they learn that the greatest asset they have for relationships and work environments and school environments is to be attractive and to lead with that. And then and then when they get older, it gets really complicated because when that starts to fade, they don't know what they have left.
I always believe that women who are attractive,
Yeah.
life always been easier for them. There's a saying that,
It's
like,
true. It's statistically true.
yeah. And men who are not as attractive,
As myself.
men who are not attractive, because I feel like attraction when it comes to men for women has to do with more than just looks. It has to do, is he an alpha male? Is he, energy, there's a thing, big dick energy, does he have money? Is there financial stability?
Yeah.
Is he popular? Does he drive a nice car? These are the things
the markers are different. Yeah.
The markers are different, where a female doesn't have to have these intangibles, these things,
Right.
but their attraction is what, opens the door for them.
Yep.
So I feel like, men and women, it's just so different on how we, go about our daily lives. And
it is, and I think that the way that I think that part of what's really hard is that then you take that, right? That's someone who's like hustling for trying to make sure that they have money and trying to make sure that they're like dominant but not too dominant, and trying to make sure that they're protected but they don't step over the line, and like all that stuff is somebody working really hard to do what they want to do. And then you have people who are working really hard to try to keep or stay or fit, and all these eating disorders and all this body dysmorphia and plastic surgery. Like everybody's working so hard to try to figure out how to stay attractive and feel good in their zone. Then when people get together, especially when they're younger, we see this in couples counseling all the time. Like people don't know how to communicate because they've been hustling so hard to get to what they think they need to be valuable, that when they actually are in relationship, nobody knows what to do with each other. And that's when everything starts breaking down.
I feel like in relationships, the value should be different from the outside value.
But then who teaches you how to make that shift, right? So then you get in a relationship, it's like you've been spending 18, 20, 28, 20, 35 years running it this way, and then you get in your home and you're kind of looking at each other like, now what the fuck do we do?
Yeah.
Right? You have your first fight. Somebody hurts your feelings for the first time. Do you swing back? Do you oh yeah? Well, if I had a mother who did like your mother did, it's like, so then what? It's like then you have people who haven't learned how to practice how to have relational skills because they've been so hard on other stuff.
Relationships is so difficult to have, definitely in this era, because what it took for me to be attracted to you, or what it took for you to be attracted to me. Let's say I had money, I was fit and stuff like that. We try to hold on to these things, but when we get in relationships, we get a little bit comfortable because we start to learn, different stuff about each other, and you like me for different reasons.
Take out all the time.
Yeah, now she's not looking the same, and let's say he loses his job or he's not financially well off anymore.
Yeah.
In relationships, you feel more protective because it's like me for different things and different reasons. So, hopefully these are not the things that are keeping you with me. Yeah. But I feel like in society today, we don't have that anymore. You have girls who want to be flaunted on IG, looking for that security on Instagram, and getting their body done, and always looking for likes and comments and security online. Then you have guys who feel like, man, if I don't get enough money, if I don't go to the gym enough, girls are not going to be attracted to me. And it's hard to date because you could be with somebody, you don't know why somebody's really with you.
Yeah. I think a lot of that too goes back to what is it you're looking for? What is the point of being in a relationship with someone for you, right? Not you, but like the theoretical you. Like
I was about to damn this.
You're like, I don't fucking know, man. You're like, hey,
I don't fucking know. Her ass is fat.
It's good enough. That's a good enough start. And then it's like, what's the point of wanting to be in a relationship? Is it just wanting? So some people, right, will just want to be in a relationship because it's someone steady they can just keep having sex with, and it's easier than having to go hunting. It's just eat, right? Like that's good enough. So just like show up when you show up, leave when you leave, never move in together, fine. Some people want to be in a relationship because they actually want to be loved and be known. right? And then some people really want to be loved and known, but have no idea how to tolerate being known and don't really know how to love. I'm sure, right? I'm sure you know people too, but like, I know a lot of people who are not well taken care of growing up. And so now that they are in their adulthood, you're watching them and you're just like, damn, like, what are you doing out there? Like making a mess of their relationships, like, you know, having super like just these fights and like in and out.
Some people are in love with dysfunction.
Yeah.
That's what they know. That's what they grew up in.
Exactly.
So a lot of females, you can be in relationships with them. And if you don't argue with them enough, for some, if you don't verbally abuse them, physically abuse them, you know, they might think you're not attracted to them or you don't love them anymore. Some people, their love language is abuse, dysfunction.
It feels like that, right?
Yeah.
So let's walk. So this is good, Daniel. Good. So let's walk that out. So, because there's a lot. This is what we say in the therapy biz. A lot to unpack there. A lot to unpack there. So if we were to say, like, how would you know, right? Or how, like, if for people you've known or people, like, friends of yours, like, how would you know that somebody really wants to kind of be pushed around or have things get intense or aggressive or physical? Like, how would you know that's what they're really wanting? Does that make sense?
Just how they handle situations, how they go about resolving issues that you have in the relationship with them.
Can you make it concrete for me? Can you think of an example?
I feel like
we also didn't do this, but if it feels like I walked too close to a line, you just
I feel like sometimes there's healthy conversation, and there's, you know, conversations that are not healthy. So if I have an issue with you, you know, I come forth to you and I tell you, you know, this is my issue. This is what I don't like. This is what I would like you to change and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That conversation turns into, well, motherfucker, this is what I don't like about you. So, you know, it's not healthy conversation.
Yeah. So it feels like it feels like one situation that somebody can't hear what you're saying you need from them because they personalize so quick. Instead of taking the information and looking at themselves and taking accountability, like, all right, this is how I make you feel. Okay, I'll try to change this. But we're so, you know, combative where we're just, you know, well, you never changed this about your behavior. You never did this. You never did that. And that turns into a whole argument, fight. And it could lead to, like, you know, don't walk away from me. You're a pussy. So look at you. You're running away. Good, Daniel. Good.
Sorry, I've been in some shit.
You're like, for example.
Remember
just
when you called me a
trying to
bitch?
Leave the room.
Yeah.
Like, let's put someone on speakerphone right now to walk through this.
You know, it's hard sometimes because you could be trying to leave an argument that's going nowhere.
So that's the abandonment stuff. So if we're going to practically look at...
Strong word. A lot of meaning.
Some may say. Unpack that, Kelly. So a couple of things that you're doing a really, like, thoughtful job of identifying. One is, we call it scorekeeping, right? Mm-hmm. When you're just like, hey, like, when you won't put your fucking phone away when I'm trying to talk to you about something, or you're like, this sounds really hard, interesting. You're like, it makes me feel like you're not even listening. Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah? Well, when we're in fucking bed and you're on your goddamn phone for 20 minutes, guess how that makes me feel? That's called scorekeeping. When people are like, tally.
I'm on my phone because I don't want to nut quick. I'm trying to distract my mind.
That's exactly what you say, listeners. Write that down. How to avoid conflict with Daniel.
BNF tip.
Right? It's like, I'm on my OnlyFans. Leave me the fuck alone.
Exactly.
Man. So that's like, you do this, which means that all people are doing is just deflecting. I'm just like, I will refuse to take in what you need and manage my feelings about that and give you what you need. I'm just going to bing, 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 bing.
Of course.
Right? And that's usually from people who grew up in families where everybody got heated really fast. Mm-hmm. So like, small problems were never kept small. Everything turned into a huge conflict. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, growing up, did your family talk about feelings, or growing up, did you, right?
My mom used to come in my room. My dad used to come in my room. They'll go without talking to each other. There's a lot of pride. So even when my mom was around, when she's mad at me, we just wouldn't speak,
for how
you
long?
know,
like growing up,
weeks. And then sometimes it'd be like, there's food downstairs.
I was just going to say, how did she apologize? I'm going to the store. You want anything?
Yeah. That's how conversations would start. We'd never resolve issues.
Right. So what would happen? Was there ever a time, like, even once you were out of the house, so we call that repair? Yeah. One of the things we ask people a lot about.
Nothing ever got repaired.
Right. And so it just feels like it's undone ends over and over and over. And totally. And then what you've probably learned is, like, when things get hard, just fucking chop off the tail, man, and slide it off, or just wait for it to get better, or leave and then kind of dip back in to see if people are still upset. And if they're still upset, be like, all right, I'll give you some space. Yeah. I'll give you some space. Yeah. So what you've learned to do when things are hard is just kind of like, all right, that's just when things get hard, your internal experience your whole life has been like stress hormones, your cortisol. There's a specific region in your brain that activates when you get into fight or when fights are happening or conflict is happening. And what you've learned to do is shut it down when things get hard. So then you're in relationships and you're like, then I'm just going to get up and walk away. So what you've learned to do is like just I'm taking space, I'm leaving, this is what I need to do, this is how my body's going to calm down, and people just keep grabbing at you. And that's probably when it gets crazy, right? Because what you're doing is what you need to do to take space, but the other person feels devalued, ignored.
True.
So if we're in couples counseling, what we would say is like, what you're doing is how you're managing your body and how you're preventing this from getting out of control. And what that person is doing is trying to prevent themselves from getting out of control by clinging. So it's not really even about the fight. It's that everybody's doing exactly what they were raised and they know how to do. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. That worked back then. It doesn't work now. Yeah. And then the question is like, all right, do you want to change it to stay in the relationship, or is the relationship not worth it?
Interesting. You're pretty good
fade out. No, you fuzz out when I go too long. You're like, fucking focus on yourself, Kelly. Yeah, that's enough.
You're making a lot of sense. Okay. Moving along. Okay, with relationships, I want to talk about mental health. I feel like the awareness, we're starting to become more aware, especially in Black families now, where that's something that we always ignored. Just like that example I gave you of me growing up, how we dealt with our issues. We never unpacked our issues. We always kept them pushed away, give it a few weeks. We never really talk about it. We never readdress issues. So now, growing up, we're learning. Growing up, we always, hid our feelings away. We never was very vulnerable. Right. What was going on in the house, we always learned to keep family business, keep in the house. And we're walking around with all this trauma. We don't know how to deal with them in a healthy manner. And that leads us to abusing other people, being violent, addiction, alcohol. Maybe we take it out on women, our partners, people that we really care about, and stuff like that. So I'm happy now there's more of an awareness, especially in the Black community with mental health.
I think there's better resources too. I think that therapy, I didn't grow up in a home where therapy was like the ultimate threat. Like if you were so messed up that it was like, if you got in really bad trouble, it'd be like, well, we're going to have to send you to go talk to someone. And you'd be like, no.
Counselor.
Right. I know. Like school guidance counselor.
Felt like you was in trouble.
Totally. But I also grew up in like a white family where everyone who I was sent, if I was threatened, was going to look like me and have like a sort of cultural similarity or an understanding of what I am, right? I think what what has happened over probably the past 20 years in the mental health field is that there's been a more significant focus for folks to find therapy and for therapy resources for like based on the communities that they're serving. Right. So there's like this one agency, it's called Black Therapists Rock. They have like a social media presence. They have a ton of referrals. You can find clinicians through them. There's New Generations Counseling, which is like all BIPOC clinicians. It's just right in Dorchester, just for the community, staffed by members of the community. So I think there's an awareness, but there's also better resources that I think make it easier and more accessible for people to come in. Because you don't have to do that explaining. Right? Like if you're just like, well, in my house, we didn't talk about problems. And the therapist is like, oh, that's a terrible news, as opposed to, that's how like half the world manages.
And I feel like the stigma has kind of changed too. Like it's not a negative thing anymore to seek therapy or to say, I have these issues, I have anxiety, and stuff like that. So,
or I think even giving like voice to trauma, right? Like I think I don't know that my parents grew up in a world where like domestic violence or like really intense fighting and violence in the house was considered that bad. It was just considered normal. More right. And I think even if you grew up in a home where it was just like knockdown, drag out fights all the time, or just like a constant perpetual like anxiety of like when that person's going to lose it, at least there's a narrative now that like you might have been afraid to say that to other people because you sort of understood that that's bad, or the police might come, or people might find out, or foster care. I think that we have a different threshold for hard things happening in private.
Do you think these words like alpha males and being masculine make it harder for men to seek therapy?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Or I think this idea that there's two, I feel like men get put on this binary spectrum, right? Where it's like you can either be vulnerable and be like a total pussy and like cry and express your feelings and talk to your girl about all your secrets, or you can be more of this alpha male dominant. And I feel like if you're stuck at either end of the spectrum, it leaves you, both are just screwed. And I think it has to be I think that part of that is, it's just the same way, like crying when you're upset or feeling sad or grieving. That's like one of the most human and expected things we do.
I don't cry.
Don't worry, I wasn't good. I'm not saying a word. I promise. Not on camera. We'll do that after. But I think the idea that people should be able to talk about the hardest things they've been through with their partners or in public, or, I mean, like we were talking before about how when you lost your mom, people were weird about it.
Yeah, very weird.
Or they would talk to you but not talk about it, and you're like, this is the biggest thing in my life right now. I buried someone who gave birth to me. Like, when you go through this, you will see that this will change your entire life and the trajectory of your life. And people are like, hey, Daniel, what's up? You good? Oh, you good? You going to eat? Oh, nice to see you. You're like quietly crying inside. Right? And I think if people can't be given permission or have people in their life expect them to cry through those periods, it's kind of like, what are we doing? And I think that's where you get stuck. Because it's like, if there's any time where people should be okay and encouraging it, it's through grief and loss. And people can't even tolerate talking about it. Seeing emotions. I
tried to seek therapy when I lost my mother during the pandemic, and I found a therapist. And there's a saying out there, you know, you have to always keep finding the right one, just because it's like, that's what they make it feel like, because you just don't find one therapist and you feel like, yo, this is the one. Obviously, you have to feel a certain, you know, I don't know, a trust or bond or whatever the case may be.
You have to like the way that they handle your feelings and handle you.
So, you know, I picked one. I tried it out. Maybe I was so desperate to just try a therapist out. So, you know, I didn't do much research.
So I think for people listening, I think sometimes what's really interesting, this is the first question I ask when I meet with people, like the why now? What is it about? Like, why now? Like, even if you've been grieving for a while, why now? Like, why right then did you pick going to therapy? Does that make sense?
Because I was afraid of, you know, what was to come next if I don't deal with my emotions, what, you know, the unpredictable, you know, like
suicidality.
I don't think I ever thought about suicide. Maybe it crossed my mind once.
So you know what's funny? We have this thing we do. I know I keep interrupting you, which is not what a therapist does. But we have this thing where we do measures for people, where we do personality structures and testing, all the psych testing. And one of the questions that they ask is, have you ever considered suicide? And it's one of the lie questions, right? So people who check no, what they do is invalidate all the rest of their answers because they know it's untrue. Almost everyone will deny, and this is not you, but like almost everyone denies ever being suicidal, yet everyone, like quite literally and statistically, almost everyone has considered ending their life through dark periods. And it's so interesting to me that people, like, even if it's fleeting or even if it's passive, like I know so many people I meet with who are like, I'm just driving on the highway and I'm just praying to God somebody hits me, right? Or I'm like standing next to the T and I just pray to God someone bumps me into the tracks. Like,
I think it's normal. I think I think it's the, you know, the stigma of I'm suicidal, which means that you're crazy.
Get my ass locked up.
I'm crazy. You know, keep sharp tools away from him. You know, like this motherfucker might kill himself. But
like,
when I really think about it, you know, when you get into that deep depression mode and you start thinking about isolation, you're isolating yourself from people, and you know, you get into this deep end and you get into these crossroads and you're like, you know what, maybe my life would be better if I wasn't here, because this person's not here no more, or everything around you during that time is not going well, you know? So I felt like during that time I was in a dark space. I lost my mom. I'm losing money. I'm losing friendships. I'm losing, during COVID, I'm losing friendships. You know, you're losing loved ones around you. So, you know, certain things might cross your mind. Not saying that you'll act upon it, but it definitely crosses your mind. Desperation. So, you know, I felt like I was afraid of what would happen next. So it made me seek therapy to try to, you know, control my emotions and stuff like that. And
how many people in your life knew how bad things were then?
Probably one or two. You had Vinny, who was around me and stuff like that. Probably like one or two.
And that, so part of what's also right for people listening.
And you know, when you have that image of yourself being this strong person, emotionalist, you know, a lot of people are like, he'll be all right.
Totally. Or they're like, they're not looking for the signs. Or you're able to like either avoid and ignore, and they're like, whatever, fucking Daniel.
This is like a free therapy session. This it was a trick all along, you know.
We're gonna get you to cry. We're gonna get you to clickbait. Minute 32. I think that part of what happens often for people is that they have, when
make
they're
sure
lucky,
this gets to my judge.
I know.
Please watch this. I gotta get this episode.
I will write you a letter.
Watch this episode in the courtroom. Please watch.
It's like it with my mom. Yeah. So sad.
Yes.
I I think that for people, when they're lucky, they have one or two that know them well enough to know when things are getting weird.
Yeah.
But sometimes the people who are even the one or two don't know what to do.
Absolutely.
Or they're kind of like, all right, I'll see you. I'll see
Yeah.
you tomorrow, man.
Yeah,
like, just
yeah.
like, let's hope he's still
Yeah,
here tomorrow when I
yeah,
show up again.
yeah.
I think often...
Or make that phone call, yo.
Right.
That motherfucker tripping.
Right.
They'll
And
tell
then,
their friend.
And then their friends are like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Click.
yeah.
Right? And everyone's quietly worried,
Yeah.
but no one knows what to do.
Yeah.
Or they tell your other friend, like, hey, go talk to him. Your friend's like, so
Yeah.
what's up, buddy?
Yeah.
And you're like, not much.
Yeah.
I think that, which is brave. And I think when people hit that point, they often feel like they're reaching out based on crisis as opposed to reaching out because there's like little stuff in their life they want to address. Right? Some people go to therapy because they're like, oh, I'm having a lot of anxiety at work and it's getting in the way of me like doing job performance. I don't know, it's not the kind of therapy I do. Other people are like, oh, I like just want to work on my fucking tennis game or some shit, right? And then other people are like, there are things happening that are so dark and scary. I don't know what to do. I don't feel like myself anymore. I feel like I'm not living in my own body. I feel like I'm watching a video of myself all day. I'm talking to weird shit in my house. I feel like I'm waiting for like things to talk back to me and I don't know what to do. That's, I think, when people enter therapy, and if it doesn't feel helpful right away, then they get even more desperate and even more lost because they reached out and they got nothing.
Right, and that could lead to alcohol, drugs.
Desperate stuff. Yeah,
You
for
know.
sure. So you reached out because it was feeling dark. And
Yeah, I reached out, and then she was a very nice lady. She was a black lady, but, you know, she came from, you know, Haitian descent, and she had a very strong Haitian accent.
Yeah.
I felt like I was talking to like my
Your
aunt
auntie.
or somebody, and I'm like, you know, a family member.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, I'm not trying to talk to you for like,
You're like, no, I got no
yeah,
problems,
30,
man.
40
No
minutes.
problems,
Yeah.
auntie.
So, you know, the first conversation was cool, you know, and, you know, it's pricey too. Therapy is not cheap, you know.
Are you paying out of pocket?
I was paying out of pocket during this time, you know. So my mass health wasn't hitting at that
Mass health
time.
doesn't
Yeah.
ever fucking
Yeah.
hit.
So now I was like, you know what? I tried it. I felt good even attempting it
Yeah. What felt good about attempting it?
because I felt like I was searching for, you know, help, and I was trying to get, you know, my mind right. And
Did you feel like you were proud of you? Did you feel like your mom would be proud of you? Like,
I felt like more me.
Good.
Because, you know,
Good.
I'm trying to make some type of initiative to,
Good.
you know, help myself,
Yeah.
you know, or seek help.
Yeah.
So once but that, you know, I should have done more after, but I didn't,
think you
and
should've.
you know,
I think this is like, I get asked for therapy referrals from people all the time. It's always, and what's so funny to me is it's always this like weird, like, hey Kelly, how's it going? I'm like, yeah, good. Anyway, could you please offer some referrals for therapy? It's always
Yeah.
this like quiet side by, or like, you got people I can talk to?
Yeah.
Nobody knows how to find therapy, or even worse, how to keep looking after. Like, why would you want to go back again when it felt like, you're like, yeah, I did it. I was good. Like, we had a nice conversation, but it didn't make anything that much easier.
Yeah.
So why go back out again? Why go back
I
out
did
again?
try after, but during this time, I don't know what happened within a 3-month period where everything was booked up, and
The wait lists are
the wait list was crazy during that time, during the pandemic, you know. So a
Still.
lot of people had issues, and a lot of
Yeah.
things were through Zoom, and it was different for me because I ain't gonna lie, I wanted to sit on somebody's couch, relax,
Lay
you know,
back.
get that face to face. So it was weird.
Dress up, look good,
yeah.
come
So it
in.
was weird, like, you know, because we have this,
Yeah.
you know, how therapy's supposed to look like, because I
Yeah.
only seen it on TV.
You're like, I saw Sopranos.
Yeah,
I know what
like,
therapy
yeah,
looks like.
yeah, I want to feel like him, you know, going there, sitting down on the couch, and, you know,
In a fancy
having someone listen
office.
to my problems. Now I got to do it through the phone on Zoom. You know, I got a cheap phone. The quality's not even good. You know, it's a flip. Yeah.
Flip phone with headphones.
Yeah.
You're like, sorry,
I
can you
really
say
have
that
headphones
again?
too. And I'm like, damn, this is weird. You know what I'm saying? I'm
You're
waiting
like,
for the
Tony
pandemic to
Soprano
be
didn't
over.
do with the
Yeah,
shit.
I'm like, when the pandemic's over, I'm gonna find a nice couch and a, you know, place to go to. But everything's been booked up, so
It is. I think that, which is, I think, great that people are seeking mental health support. I think wait lists are like 5, 6, 8 months long.
Damn.
And it's like, if you're desperate now, 8 months from now with nothing is going to leave you
Yeah.
so much worse off.
Yeah.
So what happened after?
So after, I probably just started, you know, doing other things to substitute for not having
Do you
a
still work out, or
therapist.
is exercise still a
No,
part of it for you?
I was exercising a lot, you know,
Back
which was
then.
helping me, which
It
was helping
really,
me. Once
really
I got
is.
over that hump, you know, of alcohol and gambling and trying to find ways to cope, you know,
Yeah.
I started really working out outside, started to get really fit.
Nice.
And then I got hit with, you know, my case because of pandemic unemployment fraud. So because of that,
Daniel.
and knowing that I had time over my head, I'm like, you know what? Once I pleaded guilty, I knew I was going to do some time. I'm like, I'm eating everything.
Yeah.
So I stopped working out. I'm like, I have enough time to work out.
Do they have Twinkies inside? I don't fucking think so.
I'm like, I'm going to be disciplined when I'm in there. Right now, I'm eating everything. Pass me the red meat. I'm eating pork. I'm like, I want it all. Like, fuck it. I don't care how much pounds I gain. Give me something to do while I'm inside. So maybe I was using that as an excuse.
Call that preparation for transition.
Yeah. See? You see how you make it sound so good and healthy?
Everything's so fancy.
So pretty much, I'm prepared. I was preparing myself. But
did it feel like this thing that's out of my control, like I'm heading in, like there's nothing I can do about it, you're just waiting for something? Did it feel like, because that's out of my control, I'm just going to find joy any way I can?
Any way you can.
Feel good. Yeah.
And it's different when you don't know how much time you really have to do. So if I knew, like, I'm only doing this, I'm only doing that, which makes the process easier for me, because now you have a lot of anxiety because it's something that you want to handle and get over quickly, but you don't know how much time you're gonna lose. So it definitely heightens the anxiety and everything else around you, trying to get stuff done. You're trying to race against time. You're making decisions that are impulsive because you want to get things done. So you're not really thinking the right way. You're more thinking about, let me hurry up and get this done. And sometimes moving too fast ain't the best way to move.
Well, it's crisis driven, right?
Yeah.
So for people,
it's crisis. See, when I start fucking up, I'm gonna start.
Call me.
Yeah, call me. These words that you make it.
I got words for you.
You make it sound so good.
You're like, thank you, Kelly. I'm having a crisis.
Yeah.
Well, I think you are. I mean, I think so. For anyone listening who finds themselves in periods like that, how did you know? Some people are not quite like attuned enough to know when they're feeling anxious. They just start burning bridges and burning relationships and getting into fights. And like I had this one kid I was talking to the other week, because I still do.
Am I holding you up too long? I just want to make sure where you are with time.
Oh no, we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. I know it's early.
Yeah. This
is usually when you're waking up.
It's very early.
God bless you. There's this like I was working with a kid who was actually tried to go in and get his time. He had some time served, but was going in. But because of COVID, they sent him home. So he's just been waiting for like 8 months to be able to figure out his time. And he is 17. He's probably looking at like 7 to 8 years.
Wow.
Which is just going to be his entire life, right?
Yeah.
And I think because he's so young, he doesn't really understand what's going to happen and doesn't really understand what it's going to look like when he comes out. And everyone else has been living for 8 years. And he's just trying to fucking figure out how to get back on the street and get his hair cut, right? Mm-hmm. So he's been getting into just fights and catching cases and making it worse. And he's like slipping. He started getting addicted to heroin. And when I was like, oh, so I bet, waiting to kind of get your actual sentencing or waiting for the dates, like is it feeling anxious? Is it feeling uncomfortable? He's like, no, I ain't fucking thinking about it. Yeah. And I was like, some may say. Yeah. Some may say. For people who aren't quite sure how to notice when they're feeling anxious versus just feeling like rage at the world, like what's the line for you? Like how did you know that you were, like what were the things that were happening that you would say, oh, that's my anxiety ticking? That's not just who I am as a person defending myself when people are rude to me in Dunkin's.
There's certain decisions that you make that you know that you would probably be more passive about or more calculated about. But because,
can you think of a concrete example? People sometimes can relate better when it's really like specific. Like, tell me if I'm interrupting you when I keep asking. Go ahead. No. Are there ever times, like, before all this happened, how did you sleep?
Oh, I was sleeping great.
You're like, never alone.
I was sleeping great.
Right. Yeah. Were you somebody who could go to bed and sleep?
Go to bed, sometimes, if I couldn't sleep, I'd probably jerk off real quick and then, knock out.
And that was
Get one out the way.
Sleep hygiene. That's what we call that.
Sleep hygiene. See, that's another word for that. See, I'm not even calling it jerking off no more. Sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene now. So
I have an advanced form of sleep hygiene. So
now, sleep hygiene if I needed to, but, I was sleeping like a baby, especially I was working out, so my body was very fatigued. Better, right? So I was sleeping early, getting up early, and I was out and about.
And how was your mental health during that? Better.
It was, I was eating cleaner. The diet was good, so my thought process was cleaner. I was waking up with a clearer mind. I went through a time where I stopped drinking for about like 90 days, even though I was involved in the club, just part of my diet and working out. I just wanted to challenge myself.
Calories, Daniel, they add up.
So, and I'm working in the nightlife, so I'll go out and be the weird guy, like drinking water. Yeah, and they still telling me I got to pay.
What's in your drink? You're like Coca-Cola.
And the bill comes out and I still got to pay.
It's like $4.95.
Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, the guys I was chilling with, it was more like $4,500, and I'm looking at them like, all I had was water.
You're like, I had 2 seltzers and a lime.
Yeah, they don't care. But I felt better.
Yeah.
I felt better. So
was your anxiety lower did you notice a difference when you stopped drinking and your anxiety going down? Or depression?
Oh yeah.
Alcohol
changes the game.
It's 100%. And part of what we like booze, what studies will say is that one night of drinking will fuck up about 5 nights of sleep after, right?
Yep,
and so especially
true.
if you have more than 2 or 3 drinks in a night, and most people tend to have more than 2 or 3 in a night, so it'll fuck up your REM. REM is so important because it's where you get all your muscle growth hormone factors back in. It's also when you like
what is that called?
Muscle. So it's RG. No, it's a growth factor. So it's FGH, I think. It's like the hormone where actually you regenerate. So during when you played ball in college, where people like, you got to get to sleep, man. You got to get to sleep, man.
Yeah.
And when I
was, it was easier back then because I was younger, because we could stay up and still get up and still run.
Right.
Now
like
I gotta sleep. Yeah.
Like if you want me to produce anything beyond a 12-minute mile.
Yeah, I gotta sleep.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. But REM is where your brain also consolidates and organizes like all the memories and the things that happen during the day, right? And so like things where you were feeling confused or overwhelmed or stuff that you're waiting for, like deep REM sleep is when your brain defrags. It essentially organizes, it's hippocampal memory. It's like right here in your brain, but it organizes and consolidates. Did you ever see the movie Inside Out? The cartoon?
No, never seen it. I had a rough childhood.
Yeah,
I didn't watch much cartoons.
Yeah, same. I was like, oh, you had cable? Must have been nice. Must have been nice.
Trick question. I didn't have cable.
You're like, gonna make me cry?
Yeah.
Trying to make me cry again? There's this video in the movie where like it's a kid's movie. It's been out recently, but like there's all the little memory balls are colored and they go on the train. The train goes to long-term memory consolidation. That's like what REM does at night for your brain. It essentially cleans up, coordinates, and organizes your memory. So if you're not getting deep sleep and if you're not getting REM sleep because you're drinking, you're not getting REM. And if you're not getting REM, then you have 5 days you're affected. So if you're drinking every day or drinking 3 or 4 days, that's your whole week shot, right? And so what happens if you don't have all of this sort of cleaning up and organizing neurologically is the next day you're just carrying over all this unresolved stuff. So most people who are super anxious drink because their anxiety is so intense and they drink to go to bed, and it's this vicious cycle where you're drinking to go to bed and then you're fucking worked up the next day and then you drink to go to bed. It's just on and on.
Yeah.
And it's hard because then we're like, well, maybe you should stop drinking. Like, maybe you should go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm doing right
yeah.
now. But exercise and no booze are the best things you can do for anxiety, despite being the hardest.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yep. Okay, so you noticed it was getting better, or the times that you noticed it was more anxiety was when, so you slept fine before, and then after your case came through, how did sleep go after that?
Felt more sleep deprived. Yeah. Sleeping was a little bit harder because I saw you thinking about your processing. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got a short amount of time. Where am I going to put my belongings? And I got to take care of X, Y, and Z. What's going to happen to this? What's going to happen to that? Was
it like this? Was it?
Damn it! She's going to be fucking out here.
I know.
What do you call that? Whore.
It's called perseveration, buddy.
What is that called?
Perseveration is when you get a thought in your head and you're like circling. Right. Or like perseveration is also what happens when you're laying in bed and you just can't go to sleep because you're just going through all the worries, and then you wake up and you're like thinking about it all night. Didn't help. It didn't make anything better. It didn't resolve anything. Yeah. So did it end up is it getting worse now that you're getting closer to the date?
Oh, I'm like that 17-year-old you talked about. Maybe it could be being,
donuts.
Yeah, being, in denial. But, sometimes, I try not to really think about it, even though, it's coming, ahead. But it's something I really try not to think about, even though I do think about it.
How do you try not to think about it? Like,
I try to keep myself busy.
And when it creeps into your head, what do you do to kind of block it and get it out?
I don't know.
Focus on yourself, Kelly.
I don't know. Go to sleep.
Yeah. Right. So that's shutting down.
Yeah,
right?
Shutting down. You try to, I try to shut down and stuff like that. But, one thing I learned about having issues and dealing with issues, you can't run away from your issues. It's always going to be there. You can run, you can hide your issues. I'm still here, So these are things that you're still going to have to face no matter what.
And totally. And I think if we were, my wish for you when you first went to therapy was that somebody was able to help and support. Like, there's very specific things that we can, so it's called thought blocking, right? And so what you're doing on your own is incredibly creative. And so if we go back, growing up in a house where things weren't talked about or processed, right? Part of what that sets you up for an adulthood is that you either have to grind to make it through hard times, or develop totally different skills to make it through hard times. Right. And so what happens is we all do what we were raised to do until the problems get too big to be resolved by that, which is kind of where you are. Right. Like, you're like, I can't avoid this enough. I can't sleep. It's coming. The date's fucking coming. Is there a part of you that's like, I wish it was today so it could just be done? and I could just figure out what's
I feel
next.
like that sometimes. I just wanted to get.
Is your pops around, or is he not?
Nah, not around.
Not around?
Like he's around, but not around. I haven't been around.
Yeah, so it was really just your mama.
Yeah, just my mom.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Not on my mom's side.
You're an only child?
Yeah, from my mother.
Aww.
Yeah, the only, her.
So you grew up as an only child?
Yeah, and also my mother had, well, I don't think you know this, but my mother also had mental health issues. She was schizophrenic, bipolar. So living with her.
Was she med compliant? Did she take her meds growing up?
Yeah, she had like a fucking basket full of, they gave her, it's crazy, drugs that you see people who are not diagnosed with the same.
Street drugs, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the anxiety
You're like,
stuff.
I'm
Xanax,
recording just so you all know.
like Xanax. The first time I heard of Xanax, because I know
You're
my
like,
mom
my
was
mom
taking
was
it. Yeah. And I'm like, motherfucker, why do you need Xanax? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you
You're like, that's from
on?
my mom.
Yeah, like, you out here popping Xanax, bro, on this regular.
You're like, wait, for how much?
Yeah. I could've gave you some Xanax.
You're like, Mass Health gave us $50 this month.
So I didn't even know it was like a popular
Things
drug
like college
that.
savings.
She was taking things that I can't even pronounce. Freaking trappers, I don't know, all types
Trazodone.
of Trazodone, so.
Did she ever go off her meds and have?
Oh hell yeah! Oh, what? When she didn't take them, it was a movie.
She must have been out of control.
It was a movie in the house. We talking about abuse, verbal abuse. Hey, the fuck you doing, stupid? It was just like, it was bizarre. But
did she get convinced you were gonna grow up to be something terrible and get out of control? Sometimes?
She thought I was doing terrible things to her.
Yeah, the paranoia.
Yeah, we could talk about stuff like that too. Growing up in the household, I forgot I was dealing with my mom who had mental health issues. But it gave me patience though. That's one thing. They did give me.
Give you patience.
Oh, let's get back. How do people date you? How do you turn it off in relationships? Like,
dating me is complicated for a lot of reasons. I won't even get into
hope you don't have sex this week.
Right.
How do I make you feel?
I'd be like, could you say more about this? Just pause it
Yes.
for a quick second.
Stop. Do you feel good?
Just want to be known and loved. Just want to be known and loved.
Where were we at?
We were talking about the day.
Yeah, you asked like how are you?
Oh yeah, I got you. Yeah, we were talking about how if there's a part of you that just wishes the day would happen.
Yeah,
just
so
get it over with.
Yeah, so sometimes I'm like, I want this to happen. To the point where my friends are like, damn, you just want to go to jail. I'm like, no, I just want to hurry up and get it over with so I can come back and continue with my life, because I don't know how life is going to be, where life is going to be at. Yeah. So for me, or adapting to, what I'm saying, society again, life changes every day. Social media changes every day. Well, fashion changes, people change. So it's just like, I'm just trying to get in, get
the
out.
work that you do too is right, because it's mostly, is it like promoting,
right?
Yeah. And this, you have a couple things you do, right? So
event planning. I like to say event planning.
Oh, all right.
I like to create my events.
Yeah, champagne towers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is perfect. I think, it does change a lot as you get going. I think that there are some people, when they start facing really difficult or challenging things, they get really avoidant of it. They just want to pretend like it's not happening, and almost like a ostrich, right? Like put their head in the ground and be like, fuck this, I don't need to look at it. It seems like you're more the type that if you know it's coming, you just want it over with.
Absolutely.
Right, which is the persevere.
Yeah.
And so what I would imagine, right, this is why people hate being friends, what I would imagine is that people who tend to have the ability to have something really hard coming and just want to push through, when you were doing sports, when you had conditioning days or days where you had to really just grind, were you the type of person when you were exercising where the harder almost the better? Days where you really had to push and really had to work.
Yeah,
did you
sometimes.
dread those days, or you were like, that's the mental health support I need.
I would dread them, but once you get there and you start going, it's like you kind of enjoy it.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And I'm sure you had people on your team, like I did too, who when it gets hard, they just sit down and take breaks.
Yeah,
absolutely. Get the fuck up.
Yeah,
what are you doing? Exactly.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so when you found people who were having a hard time or who wanted to quit midway, did you kind of lose respect for them?
Yeah, you will.
Were you kind of like, guess who's not a starter?
Yeah.
Guess who's not going to be captain?
Yeah.
Right? People who are kind of more of the harder it gets, the more I push through and grind, tend to have had lives where if they didn't, and I'm going to guess, right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that tends to come from having a lot of years, usually when you're a kid, where you felt like if you didn't get it done, nobody was going to get it done for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you didn't get your ass out of bed, no one's going to get you up and go to school. If you didn't figure out how to stay.
I was on chins as a kid because I had to wake up early.
Back when we called it chins.
Yeah.
It's called a craw now.
Oh, it's called a craw now. Well, back
Child
then,
requiring assistance.
yes,
Yeah.
I had a probation officer because I used to show up to school, middle school, at like 8, 9 o'clock because nobody was, waking me up.
And why? And what was happening? Why was nobody waking you up?
My dad was working a lot during that time. Nobody in the house. I was a kid. I was doing whatever I wanted to do. So I was going to school at 10 p.m., 9 o'clock, then they're like, yo, something's going on with this kid. And then, they gave me a probation officer.
What was going on? Or did you just keep that private?
Well, I just kept it private and stuff like that.
I think
but
that happens to so many kids, right?
Yeah.
So then they get juvenile justice involved.
Yep,
They get
yep.
DYS involved. They're like, what's going on at home? They're like, why don't you go fuck yourself?
Yeah,
they're
that
like,
started.
insubordination.
Yeah, it started. That's why they say school to prison pipeline. Because for me, being in the system started early since middle school. Having a probation officer, dealing with the court system, because just me being late for school and showing up whenever.
And what was the family story? Like, what do you think your parents?
Oh, it was my fault. Motherfucker, I told you to go to bed at time.
Have you met my parents?
Yeah, it's of
like
course it's my fault.
Like it's a weekend. Waking up
I thought you was in bed.
And what were you doing?
I was doing whatever I wanted to do at that time.
Like
coming
out the
home
house
late,
or-
out the house, because there was no discipline.
Yeah.
Around. Sometimes there was, but when there wasn't, just took advantage of it.
And when did it sort of happen like there was either no discipline, and then when things, like for whatever reason, then your parents like over disciplined? Like then it got a little out of
my
control?
mother, see, when my parents divorced early, I was probably in elementary school. Then I went to go live in Florida for a year. Then I came back and lived with my father. Because my mother couldn't raise me. She's like, I can't, you're in Florida, you're out of control, just misbehaving.
What were you doing that she felt like?
Kid stuff.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I wasn't doing nothing crazy. I wasn't violent. I wasn't like running the streets or nothing. But,
At the time, did you feel like, when she was saying, I can't take care of you, at the time, did you feel like you were doing something? Like, is it your adult lens that can look back and be like, I wasn't that bad?
Nah, my adult lens, definitely I wasn't that bad. 2, I felt like Boston was the proper place for me to be, to be raised in, because that's where I had my structure, my friends and stuff like that. So, Florida was definitely not, Florida's a different place. It's different. I was in Orlando, Florida, in the hood. It is different. If I felt like if I stayed in Florida, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
So, I felt like it was the right move for her to send me back to my dad, because she was thinking I was getting my discipline.
Yeah, more kids die in the Florida foster care system than even Texas, and that's like Texas is bad.
Yeah,
so
I believe it.
good
My aunt was a
instincts.
foster care parent, and I used to see kids coming out her house like every few weeks.
In Florida?
In Florida. That, people use that as a way to, gain money and stuff like that. Not trying to say my aunt wasn't doing her
No, I hear
due
you.
diligence
I hear you.
as a foster parent, but,
Yeah.
it's a business also.
It can be a business, yeah.
So.
Okay, so then you came back up and you were living with your dad.
Yeah, I came back up living with my dad, and during that time, like I told you, I went to middle school, got into like a probation officer. I had him for a little bit.
So when you got brought into court, and they were like giving the reports on what was happening and how often you weren't going to school, what did you do? What did you think through all that? Like, what did you think of that process? Like, how did you understand what was happening to you?
It was hard to comprehend, being that young, and of course, system answering things that you think might affect your parent, think might get him in trouble. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to get him in trouble and stuff
where's
like
your
that.
dad? Oh, I'm telling me to get out of bed.
Yeah. So it's all my fault. You know what I'm saying? I'm just not listening. I'm just not doing my due diligence as a child, so. I didn't put no blame on him because, and then you don't want to be removed from your home.
I know.
So, I just played the game.
So then you got your ass up and went to school?
Got my ass up. Well, they were calling me. They was making sure.
Did they have the guy go to your door?
Yeah, they made sure I got up there early. And I didn't live that far from the school. School's like 10 minutes away. I lived in Dorchester. I lived on Lucerne. I went to Thompson.
Hustling down the street.
Yeah, I went to school in Morton. It was on Morton Street, and I lived in Dorchester, so right off Woodrow. So it was like a 10-minute walk.
Part of what kills me about the way that schools, right, and I think speaking to the school to prison pipeline, which it's like now we know that starts in daycare, right?
Yeah.
That like black boys in particular, and then black girls, and then white boys, and it's always white women who are like the last to get socially consequenced for anything ever, get kicked out starting in preschool. So they get higher consequences and they get longer periods of suspension starting when they're like 4.
Yeah.
Right? And then they end up in middle school and end up getting like what the school could have done is have like a person or protocol where somebody goes to your house and knocks on the door and helps you get ready and helps you come.
Yeah.
It's that person's job. They get 90 minutes in the morning. A lot of school districts do this. Go school to school to school, get kids up and get them to school. That would have prevented ever from having DYS be part of your life. You would never have known what the inside of a courtroom looks like.
Exactly.
You would never be accustomed talking to a judge. You would never know that nausea of sitting waiting for your name to be called. You'd never know what it feels like to have a probation officer who's got a file on you. Like, none of that would have been a part of your childhood.
Yeah.
So that the first time you go to court in adulthood, none of that would feel familiar or like, I know how this works and I know how this goes, right? And so part of the socialization into like criminal, this is like the entire like structure of white supremacy basically, but like we socialize kids into higher consequences so that when they find themselves in an adulthood, it doesn't feel inconsistent with who they are and how they live. It feels more like, oh yeah, I know. It's like, all right, now we go to court and we sit and we fucking wait and you don't say anything to probation and they'll come in, they'll write a fucking letter. Like, when you don't have that knowledge, it tends to feel more like an identity crisis in adulthood because you're like, this isn't me, this isn't how I live. But for kids who've been systems involved, they get into adulthood and they're like, another fucking day.
Yeah.
Right? And then it becomes really, really hard to support them in like, this is so fucked up. The fact that this got introduced so early for you. This is not how it should be, and it's unfair that it was, and it's painful that it was, but that's traumatic that it was, as opposed to, I mean, like, how many kids did you know on Carl's growing up?
A lot.
Oh, you didn't, right? I mean, same. Right, and I think then if we went to like, you know, Cambridge or Arlington or Concord, there's not a lot of kids who are on CRA with chins back in the day, but because they have finances and support structures and school systems that support and help, as opposed to consequence and system involved.
Yeah.
It's white supremacy doing what it was designed to do.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's fucked up, right? Because then I think what happens for people is that then when they're in adulthood, and then it feels like if people look at your folder, your juvenile record's sealed, but they'll see that there's a juvenile record. They just don't see what's in it.
Yeah.
It just creates a different picture.
When they say things are sealed, they're not, because when I was reading my thing, I was like, God damn, they still got this on here? Shit.
You're like, why did I use an alias? Son of a bitch.
I was 17.
I know.
This ain't got nothing to do with what's going on. I'm like, my judge is going to be like, damn.
You're like, can I white out a couple things before we send this folder?
Yeah, exactly. But
you're like, those damn fingerprints.
that was early on in my life, and like I said, I seek therapy, and also my mother was also dealing with mental health issues.
Yeah.
I remember during an early age where my mother used to, just have these bizarre moments, and police would come get her because I didn't understand what it was.
What do you remember about those?
I remember, just bizarre behaviors that, like, what the hell is wrong with mom?
What in particular? Do you know?
I remember her just keep, repeating the same things, just staying still, not doing much. Or
when you were a kid, was it scary?
I was never scared because the way, the people around her, like people in my family, would react like it was normal behavior.
Gotcha.
So I never thought nothing of it. Like I remember one time, particular moment when she was having a bizarre moment, and I'm like, trying to get her attention, and she's still doing the same thing, and I'm just like,
was she just spaced out?
Spaced out in her own zone.
My gut, and so usually, for people listening who have family members like that, it's usually either a result of over medication. Mm-hmm. So for people who have mental health issues, there's like a range, right? There's like anxiety and depression. There's stuff that can come and go. We consider it organic, like you're kind of born with a predisposition. If you've had, I won't bore you, but there's this thing called legacy trauma or intergenerational trauma, where if there's been numbers of people in your family who've experienced trauma through all their generations, and I think we would argue that anyone, for almost anyone growing up in America where their legacy has been tainted by like racism and racial trauma, what we have a lot of data on is but there's both microaggressions and like the overt experiences of racism and hostility and threat has such an impact on the neurological architecture for even young kids growing up that so that all that stuff gets genetically passed down, and so then people are born with systems loaded that are more sensitive to hard things that happen and more overwhelmed. So dissociative coping is when people kind of just flatline. Like you probably have some friends that when they get really stressed out, they just kind of stare into space and do nothing. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when people are offline, it can be just because they've gotten overwhelmed and go offline, but usually it's because their medications are irresponsible.
I remember my mother, once I started to understand more as I got older, they would take her off different meds because certain meds give different side effects, different reactions and stuff like that. Did she ever
shuffle when she walked, drag her feet a little?
Nah, she was never that. It was more when to me, as I got older, when I started living with her, is when she wasn't taking her meds. Yeah. you know, her responses would be, you know, bizarre or whatever case may be. She'll say she's taking them and not take them. And sometimes, you know, she was diagnosed with bipolar, being schizophrenic and stuff like that. But sometimes I feel like my mother just loved attention sometimes. So if I wasn't giving her attention she needed, she knew that if I don't take my medication, you know, I'm going to be paying attention. And she goes to the hospital. When she gets to the hospital, she starts acting normal again. When she starts seeing doctors and things that probably might, for her, mean trouble.
And when you were a kid, when do you remember kind of first being like, is this real, or is she just doing this to try to get me to engage or disengage with her?
I didn't really understand it until we started living together, because it was parts of my life where me and my mother didn't live with each other. Yeah. She lived in Florida. So once I graduated high school.
So it looked like your young adult years?
Yeah, she wasn't around, you know. Yeah. So once I graduated high school and was entering college, she moved back, and we didn't start living together for like 2-3 years after that point while I was in college. That's when I started to understand it and see it and gain patience. You know, these are, you have to deal with these people in a delicate manner, because you have to understand they're not being themselves.
You are wired to deal with people in a delicate manner.
Yeah.
Other people would become volatile and aggressive.
Yeah. But,
But that's a testament. So I know, right? This is where it gets hard. But this is a testament to, I think, how, there are some people in the world who hurt people. That's just the way it works. And there's a lot of people who've been hurt or feel like their parents have failed them.
Yeah.
That when they get old enough and their parents are vulnerable, or they're seeing them as human,
they're gonna fuck them over.
Oh, for sure. Or they're like, "Who the fuck do you think you are?
Yeah.
Asking me for help, like you fucking bitch."
Yeah.
And it just turns the other way.
Yeah.
So your wiring is to take care of your family when they're vulnerable.
Yeah, because I understood, her condition. And it taught me a lot of patience, because I had to take her to appointments. I had to, be there, translate, because she didn't speak English, wasn't her first language. So I had to do a lot of translation.
Creole?
Yeah, Creole, Haitian Creole. So I was at all her appointments while I'm balancing going to school, playing ball, work, and all that. And then I got to, put her on the train because I wasn't driving, bring her to her appointments. That's 10 o'clock, like this interview. That's why I got PTSD.
That's right. Talk about overwhelming.
PTSD. So it definitely taught me a lot of patience and stuff like that. And
how did it? But what did it teach you? Patience, or did it teach you to endure?
Also endure.
Yeah.
Because there's times where you want to get pissed off, and she's going on her rants and calling me all type of names and stuff like that. You just got, what can you really do?
Yeah.
So
did she ever get physical?
No, I never got physical, but there's been times where it's like leaving the stove on, and it's like there's nothing there. Like, lady, what the hell, you trying to kill us?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, but I'll bring her into the clinic, and that's the hospital. That's something that she liked. She liked the doctors coming to her and be like, "Hey, are you okay? How you feel today? 1 through 10, da da da." And you see her acting normal again. You're like, "What's wrong? This lady is cooked." Now she's acting all normal.
Yeah. Did you ever say anything to her?
Nah.
Did you ever say anything to the doctors?
Yeah, sometimes the doctors would give me my little, 3 minutes of,
Were you like, look?
Yeah. Change the meds.
You're like, it's fucking fake.
Yeah, she's faking. She knows what she's doing.
Did
sometimes.
Did anybody ever ask you how you're doing and all that? Like, for all the mental health people you're encountering, did anybody ever say, how you holding up with this?
No, they just did their jobs, prescribed pills, and kept it moving.
And
wrote a little note,
100%. And I think that's another reason why people don't. If they've had family members that have interfaced with the mental health system, they're just like, dude, I saw what that was like.
Yeah.
And I think as a young, you were probably what, 20, 21?
Yeah, I was like 21. Yeah.
You're a baby. Like, that's like, I know, right? Like, I'm old enough now. I'm like, 20 what? Like, what do you know at 21?
Yeah.
Like, and you're dragging your mom around. You're having to manage her appointments. You're balancing college. You're doing sports. You're trying to figure out how to live. You're probably trying to figure out a social life and trying to figure out how to live a little bit. You just move back up. I mean, that is more than any one person can really balance well. And so my assumption would be that a lot of people, not just failed you, but there was support all around, and nobody was. Family members or caregivers for people with significant mental health end up shouldering this incredible burden, because the person who's help seeking gets all the support, and the people around them making it work are totally left to struggle.
Yeah.
So for people who grew up in homes where they probably had a parent really struggling or a parent with addiction, everything was focused on that, and they just kind of watch and get left behind, which is so hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just bored you
But
again. I can
no,
tell whenever I try to do the like, you're so brave. You're like,
we don't. I don't. You know how protecting that vulnerable side. It's like
shut the fuck
but.
up.
I did use it when financial aid came.
Not using it, that's honest.
I was honest, but
honest.
we're just like,
but isn't that fucked up that it feels like you're doing something cheap? When you're like,
they read my story
and
they're like, oh my God, we're gonna give you your own scholarship.
It's called the Daniel Scholarship.
Daniel
now.
Scholarship. I didn't have to pay anything. I was just like,
People who haven't had hard things happen and don't have complicated life stories get to be honest about their family every fucking day.
Yeah.
And I think the burden is that people who have more complicated family stories, it feels like you're somehow manipulating or cheating.
Yeah, it did feel like that.
Totally. Every other person,
I'm bringing
wrote a
all the
goddamn
medical
essay
bills.
about their family
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
They share their finance. They do the same thing,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, this is me being honest the same way everybody else is honest.
Yeah.
It's just a lot more. It's so unfair that it feels like that for young people. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, it did feel weird though.
Totally, and then you feel like,
Yeah,
I got the money from you.
like I screwed the system. In
Totally.
reality, people really do this all the time. I was telling the truth. This is my story. This is what I'm going through.
And there is such a suffering is suffering, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think it makes sense to compare suffering. I don't think it makes sense to try to relativize pain. It is I grew up like poor too. Like my parents became public school teachers, and that's when we were like living large.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember going to college. I was a first generation college student. Nobody else in my family had ever been to college. And I looked at the books in the bookstore and I was like, $400 for a book?
Yeah.
And I had classmates who didn't even blink. I remember thinking like, the fuck did you grow up that you can drop like $2,000 on books and not be like, suffering is suffering, but when you have parents who can like pay your rent and parents who pay your school,
it makes it easier.
Totally. It's not suffering.
Yeah,
it's
for
not.
sure.
Like your school anxiety and test anxiety and performance anxiety is different. So all that to say, when you come to periods like now where you're facing something incredibly hard, it probably feels familiar more than it feels terrifying and unexpected for you.
Sure.
And that's unfair.
Yeah.
I know you're doing it again.
I don't like to make myself sound like a sad story.
It's not a sad story. It's honest.
Hopefully I get some pussy
Yeah, I know, right.
from this episode.
So good.
Women, please DM me. If you feel sorry for me.
Right, that's exactly. You're like, I got 2 weeks.
I got 2 weeks. DM me, please.
Pen pals.
I feel sorry. Oh my God, you went through all this trauma.
Yeah,
Let me make you feel better.
That's exactly the wish. But I think part of what's so unfair is that people feel like it's an over accommodation to get support for the hard things they've been through when it's just honest.
Yeah.
And people feel like they need to minimize their lives and minimize their pain, or they don't deserve therapy, or they don't deserve trauma. It's like people are in therapy because they didn't get fucking picked for their high school sports team. Like, fuck that.
Yeah, I ain't real life.
No, it's not. And I think it's totally not. And I think that's where a lot of the stigma comes from, where people feel like they're selling their story.
Yeah.
Or they're just making it worse than it has to be. Everybody has hard times.
Or and I feel like being a black male, we don't like being charity cases, and we don't like, because we know a lot of people who go through the same issues as us, who look like us.
Right.
So we don't try to make ourselves feel better than anybody. We feel like, oh, my man's going through this. Like it's normal to us. Normalizing pain and trauma, where it's like, why complain about something that's normal to us? This is what we go through. This is what it is. We just try to overcome it, not talk about it, and use this as some type of use this as some type of way of overcoming. Or when we're playing sports, we try to be like, hey, we're trying to get out, so it makes us play harder, so we try to use it more as a way of motivation.
Yes, and I think that the way that systems for hundreds of years and the way that housing and white supremacy has structured most of the social supports available to people reinforce that belief that this is normal and typical, and this is what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that that's like one of the greatest fucking successes of white supremacy.
Yeah.
Is that it has convinced people that this is normal and a brotherhood to have a shared identity around this, as opposed to this is so unjustly and egregiously unfair. There was a study done that talked about how eviction is to black women as incarceration is to men, right? That black women are 200 times more likely to be evicted from apartments and lose housing and have housing instability. And when you don't have housing and you have kids, you're fucked. You can't get jobs, you can't get anywhere. And incarceration creates these huge disruptions in life cycle. How do you get out and get work?
Yeah.
And people are like, where you been for 2 years? You're like, well, funny story, man.
I even think about that. I'm like, damn, I'm gonna have to get a job probably. And what kind of job am I going to get? I'm like, I always want to be a garbage man. Maybe.
Good pay, pension.
Might have to do that, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, it's a cycle now. Now entering the system is more thinking about coming out, finding a job, because you're gonna have to find a job because of supervised, you know, probation and stuff like that.
People are gonna expect you to perform, just like
absolutely
done everything they can to hinder your performance.
Absolutely.
Yep, I know.
I feel like you talk about a lot about white supremacy and stuff like that. A lot of black men watching this are definitely gonna DM you. I don't know if you have Instagram, but
Still got
like,
it.
wow,
Still
she understands us.
No, it's not. I think part of what
we like to be coddled. Please, yes.
It's not. I know, Dad. I'm gonna freaking do this every time. It's not coddling. I think honestly, one of the reasons, like for people in my life and for people I work with, like one of the reasons people who have sort of traditionally or from a family or historical perspective don't go to therapy is because they don't want to have to explain themselves.
Yeah.
And all the in your house, did people ever say did they say lying, or was lying like not a word that was used?
Every time I spoke, they said I was lying. Lying motherfucker.
I believe you. I think you have important things to say. Like, there's a lot of my friends' families growing up, like, lying was, especially for, like, families of my friends who grew up, her parents are from Jamaica, like, lying was just not a word that was ever used, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I remember when I went to her house is people would always say, like, oh, she's telling stories. And I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I think that people get really tired of having to explain themselves to therapists and feel like there's so much catch up if there's a cultural dissimilarity, like if it's transracial or... So all that to say, what we know from data is that people are more likely to have a good experience in mental health services with someone who has similar cultural markers as them, but not exactly. Like you were saying, it was really hard to talk to someone who had an accent that sounded like your auntie.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like probably easier than talking to some like white dude from like Concord, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. Like that there has to be enough shared similarity, but not an exact match is usually a best way to find it.
No, that makes sense.
Right? Because it's almost like you feel like you're talking to like if I was sitting with someone that looked like my sister, I'd be
like,
yeah,
exactly. That's why they say, I have a podcast. They're saying this is therapy. Now they say that's the saying now with black men with a microphone.
Totally.
Like take black men's microphone. They think this is therapy. They think, I don't need a therapist. I got a microphone.
In another story about my child.
I'm a podcast. Who needs therapy? This is.
We need both.
We do need both. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
I am so fortunate that I got to talk to you at this point in your life.
I know.
I'm grateful.
I appreciate all the awareness that you're bringing on, for you to even take this field, because I feel like this is a field that we need more of,
100%. You know what we'll do? In the comments, we'll drop all the ways I know
Please.
to help people find therapy.
Can you give any
yes.
clinics and stuff like that?
Totally. So let me look them up because I want to make sure I'm giving you ones that don't have long wait lists. But the ones that I know of that are usually a good fit, especially for folks for BIPOC communities. So there's New Generations Counseling. I know they take Mass Health. They're in Boston. I'll throw their websites and stuff up. And there's a bunch of social media sites that I can get people to. Some people really like mental health support but aren't ready for therapy.
Yeah.
And like maybe more groups or more like Instagram things. Like, so we'll give a range.
I know people who do the life coach thing. It's not
totally.
it's not a therapy, but it's kind of like a mental health support type of thing.
And I think it's always like the one, and I know we said this 50,000 times already, but like fucking fire people liberally. If it doesn't feel like a good fit, man, get out. I know it's exhausting, but you deserve it.
Would you like to share your social media with us so we can follow you?
I'm so old. I don't have social media.
Oh, you don't have social media? Come on. All that wisdom and,
I'll jump on yours. You give me the password. I'll totally jump on and take over. We'll do hiatus.
No Facebook, nothing?
Oh my God, I might have a Facebook somewhere. God knows what's
we got to
on
get you
man.
an Instagram after this episode.
Friendster? I might have Friendster.
We might.
With the young people.
I don't think we're on there.
MySpace, are we doing that?
We got to get you an Instagram because your voice needs to be heard. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people would follow you and just to give advice to people,
I would love it.
So I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on here, Kelly. Anything else you want to ask me? After all that advice you gave me. Anything else you want to say?
That's it. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a special episode. It's a mental health awareness episode. I want to give a last shout out to Quench Juice Cafe in Brockton. Make sure you get that BNF smoothie coming out soon. 194 Oak Street. This was a great episode. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.